Elena, a waitress at an upscale Atlanta restaurant, becomes the target of Victor, a wealthy and arrogant patron who publicly challenges her to play the piano, aiming to belittle her in front of an audience. The tension escalates as Victor's mocking tone and condescending behavior highlight his sense of entitlement and disregard for her dignity. As Elena faces the pressure of proving herself in a room filled with judgmental gazes, her story explores themes of power imbalance, resilience, and reclaiming one's identity, against an infuriating backdrop of class prejudice and subtle systemic biases embedded in her interactions. It was a sultry Saturday evening at Verona, an exclusive dining establishment tucked into the vibrant core of Atlanta, Georgia. The restaurant buzzed with energy, laughter cascading like melodies, crystal glasses chiming in celebration, and the sultry notes of a jazz pianist weaving seamlessly through the air. Among the staff moving like clockwork through the high-end dining room was Elena, a 27-year-old waitress with a reserved demeanor and a mysterious gleam in her eyes. To most patrons, she was simply another server, tending to their needs with poise and efficiency. But beneath her composed exterior, Elena harbored a burning passion that far exceeded the ornate walls of Verona. Her love for music. The tranquil elegance of the evening was soon interrupted by the entrance of Victor Remington, a millionaire mogul renowned for his imposing presence and razor-sharp wit. Flanked by a group of equally poised and self-assured companions, Victor strode into the restaurant like a king entering his court, commanding attention with his magnetic yet overbearing demeanor. Known for his love of theatrics and a penchant for making others squirm, Victor thrived on asserting his dominance, often at someone else's expense. As Victor surveyed the room, his gaze landed on Elena. Something about her quiet determination caught his eye. Or perhaps it was merely the promise of amusement. A smirk curled on his lips as he devised a plan, one that would challenge her in the most public and humiliating way possible. He sought to test her spirit, to see if she could withstand his provocation or crumble under the weight of his orchestrated spectacle. The stark contrast between their worlds was palpable. Elena, a young woman clinging fiercely to her dreams, stood in sharp contrast to Victor, a man accustomed to flexing his power for his own gratification. But what unfolded next would upend expectations, as a moment of raw defiance and brilliance reshaped the dynamics of the room, leaving an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. Elena's journey began in a quiet, close-knit town in rural Alabama, where dreams often felt as unattainable as the distant stars. Her life was shaped by simplicity and struggle, raised by a single mother who worked tireless double shifts as a nurse to keep their modest household afloat. Despite the challenges, her mother's unwavering determination taught Elena the value of resilience. Their tiny living room was home to a battered but cherished upright piano, its keys slightly out of tune. It had been a gift from a neighbor who could no longer play and hoped it might find new life in their hands. From the moment Elena first pressed her small fingers to the ivory keys, an undeniable fire was ignited within her. Music became her sanctuary, a space where she could channel her emotions, explore her aspirations, and momentarily escape the realities of their hardscrabble existence. With no formal lessons or guidance, her talent blossomed through sheer determination and a connection to the music that ran deep within her soul. Elena had no formal teacher, but she didn't let that stop her. She taught herself to play by mimicking melodies she heard on the radio, gradually moving on to more challenging classical compositions from worn, second-hand music books. Her determination and raw talent caught the attention of those around her. By the time she was a teenager, Elena was performing at church gatherings, school functions, and local community events, earning quiet admiration from her small-town audience. But talent alone wasn't enough to shield her from life's relentless challenges. At 18, the reality of financial hardship struck with full force. Scholarships to prestigious music schools never materialized, and family responsibilities outweighed dreams of performing in grand concert halls. With a heavy heart, Elena put her aspirations on hold and took on various jobs to help her mother and keep their household running. A few years later, Elena made her way to Atlanta, hoping for brighter prospects. She found employment at Verona, the upscale restaurant with its grand piano prominently displayed in one corner. Though her busy shifts left little time to play, the piano's presence offered her a quiet sense of comfort. It served as a silent reminder of the dream she had yet to relinquish. Music had never truly left Elena. It lingered like a whisper, waiting for the right moment to rise once more. Despite the long hours and demanding work, her passion for the piano burned quietly within her, a steadfast ember refusing to fade. Elena often imagined the day she would rediscover the courage to let her music fill the air again. Little did she know, that day was closer than she ever anticipated. It was a typical Friday evening at Verona. The restaurant bustled with diners, savoring their meals beneath the soft glow of ornate chandeliers. Elena navigated the floor with practiced ease, balancing trays and offering polite smiles as she worked her way between tables. Her thoughts occasionally drifted to the piano in the corner, a symbol of a life she still longed to embrace. The rhythmic flow of the evening was abruptly disrupted by the dramatic swing of the restaurant doors. Heads turned as Victor Remington entered, his arrival impossible to ignore. His tailored suit, gleaming shoes, and commanding presence announced his status before he even spoke. The charismatic millionaire was flanked by a circle of equally polished companions, each exuding an air of entitlement. Victor's sharp gaze swept across the room, lingering briefly on the grand piano before landing on Elena. There was something about her, perhaps the quiet determination in her posture, or the glimmer of ambition in her eyes, that seemed to catch his interest. A slow smirk formed on his lips, and it was clear he had already decided she would be the night's entertainment. Elena approached his table with steady steps, despite the strange energy radiating from him. "Good evening, welcome to Verona," she greeted, her voice polite and professional, her practiced smile firmly in place. Victor leaned back in his chair, his piercing eyes scanning the name tag pinned to her uniform. "Elena, is it a lovely name?" he drawled, his tone dripping with calculated charm. "Tell me, Elena, do you have any hidden talents?" The question caught her off guard, and for a moment, she hesitated. I play the piano sometimes," she admitted softly, her gaze flickering toward the instrument in the corner. She hoped to end the conversation quickly, but Victor's smirk only widened. "A pianist, you say? How delightful," he announced, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of nearby diners. "Why don't you grace us with a performance? Let's see what you've got." Elena froze, her heart pounding as his words hung heavily in the air. "Oh, I couldn't," she replied quickly, forcing a nervous laugh. "I'm just here to work tonight." "Nonsense," Victor's voice boomed, cutting through the hum of the restaurant. "There's a piano right there. Surely, someone with your talents wouldn't shy away from a little audience." The room quieted, as patrons turned their attention to the commotion. Elena felt their curious eyes on her, waiting to see what she would do. Her chest tightened, and her hands fidgeted with the edge of her tray as she glanced nervously at the piano. "I really shouldn't," she stammered, her voice barely audible over the weight of the moment. Victor leaned forward, his smirk now a full-fledged grin. I see all talk. No talent, that's disappointing." The sting of his words hit her squarely, and for a brief moment, her resolve wavered. But as she looked at the piano, something stirred deep within her, a defiant ember reigniting, ready to burst into flames. Victor's mocking tone landed like a slap, cutting deeper than Elena anticipated. Her fists clenched at her sides as her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Never let anyone make you feel small, Elena. You're stronger than they'll ever know." After a moment of tense silence, Elena straightened her back, her chin lifting as she met Victor's smug gaze. "Fine," she said, her voice low but steady. "I'll play." A ripple of anticipation swept through the room as she turned toward the grand piano. Each step she took was deliberate, the weight of fear, defiance, and an unshakable determination pressing heavily on her shoulders. The dining room grew quieter with each passing second, the once lively chatter reduced to a murmur as all eyes followed Elena's every move. The soft glow of the chandeliers illuminated the piano, casting a spotlight that isolated her from the crowd. Her coworkers paused their tasks, their curious gazes lingering as she slid onto the polished bench. The piano's gleaming keys seemed to beckon and intimidate her all at once. Behind her, Victor reclined in his chair, his smirk etched firmly across his face, radiating the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. Elena hesitated, her hands hovering just above the keys. Her fingers trembled as a rush of doubt threatened to overwhelm her. This wasn't a familiar church recital or a small-town event. It was a room full of strangers, their gazes heavy with expectation and judgment. But deep inside, beneath the swirling uncertainty, a quiet resolve began to rise. This wasn't about Victor or proving anything to him. This was about reclaiming the part of herself she had buried for far too long, the part that lived for music. Drawing in a deep, steadying breath, Elena closed her eyes and let the noise of the room fade into the background. Then, with purpose, she placed her fingers on the keys. The first notes came softly, hesitantly, like the tentative steps of a child testing unfamiliar ground. A ripple of whispers passed through the crowd, but Elena didn't let it distract her. As she began to play Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy, the delicate and haunting melody gradually filled the air. Each note was a thread of her story, woven together with the sacrifices her mother had made, the countless nights spent practicing on a worn-out piano, and the dreams she had deferred but never abandoned. Her confidence grew with every measure, the chords swelling with emotion. The hesitation that had marked the beginning of her performance melted away, replaced by a fluid grace that captivated everyone in the room. The chatter of the restaurant faded entirely. Diners sat frozen, their meals forgotten, their eyes fixed on Elena as though she had cast a spell over them. Even Victor, who had been murmuring snide comments to his companions, fell silent. The smirk that had seemed permanently etched onto his face vanished as the beauty of her playing began to sink in. Elena lost herself in the music. In that moment, she wasn't a waitress. She wasn't just a dreamer with a forgotten passion. She was an artist. Each note carried a quiet defiance, a rejection of the limitations imposed on her by life, circumstances, and the man who had sought to belittle her. As the final chord resonated through the room, a profound stillness lingered in its wake. The dining room remained frozen, as if no one dared to disturb the weight of what had just unfolded. And then, slowly, the silence gave way to applause. It began tentatively, a few claps here and there, but quickly built into a roaring ovation. Diners rose to their feet, their faces lit with admiration and awe. Elena's co-workers, who had been watching anxiously from the sidelines, broke into wide smiles and joined in the applause, their earlier hesitation replaced with pride and genuine appreciation. Victor, however, remained seated. His slow, reluctant claps sounded hollow against the enthusiastic cheers of the crowd. The confident, cocky demeanor that had defined him all evening had dissolved, leaving him looking small and exposed. Elena turned slightly on the bench, her eyes scanning the crowd. The expressions she saw reflected back at her, respect, admiration, and even awe, were unlike anything she had anticipated. The people who had viewed her merely as a server now saw her for who she truly was. Her gaze briefly met Victor's. His eyes no longer carried the smug superiority they had earlier. Instead, there was something closer to discomfort, perhaps even regret. Elena didn't linger on him. She offered a calm, unreadable expression before rising from the bench. Her legs trembled as she stood, but her back was straight, her posture exuding quiet confidence. She nodded graciously to the applauding diners, her lips curving into a faint but genuine smile. The performance hadn't just been about proving her talent. It had been a reclaiming of her identity, a bold declaration that she was more than her circumstances. For the rest of the evening, patrons stopped her to offer words of praise and encouragement. "You were extraordinary," one woman whispered, her eyes shining. "Don't let anyone ever dull your light." "You have a gift," a man added, his tone earnest. "The world needs to hear more of it." Their words were more than compliments. They were affirmations of the dreams Elena had carried in her heart for so long. She thanked them with quiet humility, her gratitude evident in her soft smile. As the night wore on, she noticed that Victor and his companions had grown unusually quiet. The bravado that had filled their corner of the restaurant had vanished, leaving behind an awkward silence. Elena allowed herself a small, private smile. The power dynamic had shifted, and the room, herself included, was forever changed. When the final table was cleared and the restaurant emptied, Elena lingered for a moment by the piano, her fingers brushing lightly over its keys. For the first time in years, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The ember of her dreams had not only reignited, but was now burning brightly, illuminating a path forward, and she was ready to follow it. The man was dressed sharply but unassumingly, his demeanor warm and inviting. As he approached Elena, there was a quiet confidence about him, a stark contrast to the ostentatious energy of Victor earlier in the evening. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady yet kind. Elena turned, startled by the interruption. "Yes?" she replied, her tone polite but curious. "My name is Daniel Grayson," he said, extending a hand. "I'm a music producer based in Nashville. I was here tonight and, well, I have to say, I'm impressed you've got something truly special." Elena's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, she wasn't sure if she'd heard him correctly. She shook his hand, her voice trembling slightly as she replied, "Thank you." Daniel smiled, the warmth in his expression putting her at ease. "I don't make promises I can't keep," he continued, "but I'd love to help you take a step forward. If you're interested, I'd like to work with you to record a demo. It's not much, but it could be the start of something bigger." Elena's breath hitched as his words sank in. This was it, a door she hadn't expected, but one that had opened nonetheless. It wasn't grand or guaranteed, but it was real. A smile spread across her face, her voice soft but filled with determination. "I'd love that." Daniel handed her his card. "Give me a call, and we'll make it happen," he said with a nod before walking away. As she watched him leave, a wave of emotion swept over Elena, relief, gratitude, and excitement all mixing together. For the first time in years, her dreams didn't feel distant. They felt tangible, within reach. Later, as the restaurant emptied and the lights dimmed, Elena found herself drawn to the old upright piano, tucked into the back room. She sat down and let her fingers glide over the worn keys, playing a quiet, reflective melody. Her thoughts swirled around the night's events, not just as a triumph over Victor's arrogance, but as a reclaiming of her own identity. For so long, Elena had doubted herself. She had hidden her talent, convinced that her dreams were frivolous, that life's demands would always take precedence. But tonight had reminded her of a truth she'd nearly forgotten. Her music wasn't just a skill or a hobby. It was her voice, her strength, her story. Walking home under the crisp night sky, Elena felt lighter than she had in years. Her steps were filled with purpose, her heart buoyed by a newfound certainty. She wasn't just a waitress, and she wasn't just a dreamer. She was an artist. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, no one could take that away from her. Elena's story is one of resilience, authenticity, and the undeniable power of embracing who you are. Faced with humiliation, she could have walked away, allowing fear and doubt to silence her voice. Instead, she chose courage. She sat at that piano and played, not to prove herself to Victor or anyone else, but to reclaim her passion and remind herself of her worth. Life is full of moments like this, times when the world seems to test our resolve, when challenges arise that threaten to derail our dreams. It's easy to shrink back, to let fear and doubt define us, but Elena's story is a reminder that we always have a choice. We can rise to the occasion, step into the light, and embrace the parts of ourselves that make us unique. Her journey wasn't just about the music or silencing a room with her talent. It was about rediscovering her identity and realizing that her passion wasn't just a dream. It was a part of who she was. It was her strength, her purpose, and her voice, and it deserved to be heard. Think about your own life. What dreams have you pushed aside because of fear or self-doubt? What talents have you hidden, worried they might not be good enough? Elena's story shows us that even in the smallest opportunities, like a piano in the corner of a restaurant, we can find the courage to take the first step toward something greater. Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up, time and time again. Authenticity isn't about being perfect. It's about being true to yourself, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Challenges, they're not roadblocks, they're stepping stones, chances to grow and prove to yourself just how strong you are. Elena's bravery that night inspired an entire room of people. Her music silenced arrogance, shattered doubt, and reminded everyone present of the transformative power of authenticity. And when the opportunity arose, a chance to work with a music producer, She didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, fueled by the realization that she didn't need validation or permission to chase her dreams. So what about you? What's holding you back? Is it the fear of failure, the opinions of others, or the belief that your dreams are out of reach? Elena's story is a testament to the fact that no dream is too big, no obstacle too great, and no moment too small to take a step forward. Let her journey inspire you. If you've been waiting for the perfect moment, remember, the perfect time doesn't exist. The only time that matters is now. Take that step. Play your song. Write your story. Pursue the dream that sets your soul on fire. You never know who you might inspire along the way. If Elena's story resonated with you, share your thoughts and your own tales of resilience in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of courage and determination. Your story might just be the next one we share.